Hello everyone, welcome to THLGK. Today we are talking about two manipulation tools. These are very common and you'll find that everywhere. So it probably won't be a very long episode, because we'll be talking about partial truths and belonging. Let's get to them. Let's start with partial truths. As the name suggests, a partial truth is a cut of reality, a cut of the truth. So you want to build a narrative, but the entire picture either does not support your narrative or they bring a lot of complications to your narrative. So what you do is, instead of lying, which you could be called out on, you pick the elements of the truth that suit your narrative and leave the rest out. See, partial truth. So you use these partial elements to build your narrative. And if anyone calls you out, then you have the moral high ground to say, I never lied. And they are right. They didn't. Let me give you an example. The video that made me want to make the channel in the first place deals exactly with this. I'm going to make a special episode about it, so I won't spoil too much here. But at some certain point, they're talking about Jesus, the first century. So Jesus lived in the first century. And then the person goes and says, oh, the Gospels were written in the first century, as part of the arguments in their narrative. That's not a lie. Yes, most scholars think that the Gospels were written in the first century. There is strong evidence for that. Precisely when, we don't know. But this is exactly the point, because what is the question we are not asking? How many years in a century? So, you get where I'm trying to go here? Saying the Gospels were written in the first century is not enough, because a century has 100 years. But this is the part of the truth that suits the narrative they're building. Why? Because look, Jesus lived in the first century. Oh, the Gospels were written in the first century. What is the conclusion most people will make in their heads? The Gospels were written in the times of Jesus. I know this, you know this, everyone knows this. But they have plausible deniability. Because if I go and say, oh, you are trying to play this and make people make this correlation between Jesus living and the Gospels being written to the Gospels were written. No, I'm not doing this. If someone is doing this, that's their mistake. You see, this is the objective. This is why it's a manipulation tool. For those who can see, it's clearly the objective to make people conclude proximity between Jesus and the Gospels. But now, let's look at reality. Let's look at the entire picture. The entire picture is Jesus would have died if he was real. Let's start there, but let's put this aside for now. he would have died around the year 30 AD. The first gospel, the Gospel of Mark, in the conservative position, which means the position from religion itself, from religious scholars. So the conservatives place the first gospel, the Gospel of Mark, being written between 65 and 70 AD. We are talking here a 35 to 40 years gap between the death of Jesus and the first gospel. The following gospels, Matthew and Luke, would be between 70 and 80 AD, 40 to 50 years after the death of Jesus. And John is believed to be between 90 and 100, maybe even 2nd century. So 60 years after the death of Jesus. You see how the entire picture makes the narrative crack, right? Crumble a little. Because now it's harder to argue that the Gospels were written in the times of Jesus. Luke, for instance, claims he's talking to witnesses. Which witnesses? 40 to 50 years after the events happened. A person who was 30 at the times of Jesus. The time of Luke writing the Gospel would be 70 to 80 years old. We are talking about 70 to 80 years old, 2,000 years ago. A person who was 20, between 60 and 70 years old. Not to mention that their own narrative tradition says that the apostles had died, at least most of them. Even Paul had died by the time of Mark. So which witnesses did they seek? Which witnesses did they interview, let's say, to get this narrative? But when you present simply the Gospels were written in the 1st century, none of this matters. None of this appears. All these questions, all that is there in the big picture, it's all gone. Because they are only using a part of the truth. Then we have belonging. I've talked about this in the past, but the manipulation tools, they are not independent. They are all interconnected. Right? They are all used together. Because, again, because of the manipulative, deceitful, lying nature of religion, they have to be applied instead of argument. So one is usually never enough. They have to apply many together. And belonging is very close to authority. Right? But the idea of belonging is a little bit different, because belonging is used when they basically accusing you of being part of a group. And because you are part of that group, what you say has no validity. This is why belonging is a manipulation tool. For instance, in a political discussion, if you have a communist making a very good point about economy, and the capitalist goes and says, yes, you are communist. None of what you say matters. So instead of tackling the argument the communist is making, the point the communist is making, the capitalist goes and says, because you are communist, I am not even bothered to address your point, to address your argument. You could make the inverse true as well, right? The communist doing to the capitalist. This is the point. In religion, you could say you are an atheist. So because you are an atheist, this doesn't apply, or something like that. The group you belong to, or the group they assign you to, works as a replacement for your argument. Or better, works as a replacement for them to have to address your argument, to address what you are saying. That's why it's very close to authority, right? The part of the specialists. The difference is the authority, the person usually is calling the authority of a group or of a person. This specialist says this. So it's true. See, the truth is not the argument itself. The truth is because a specialist or a group of specialists is making the argument. The belonging, no. The belonging would work basically like this. Only specialists can talk about this. So only if you are part of a specialist group. You see, it's very close to authority. Or you are not a specialist. So it's still authority, authority is still present. But they're making you being a part of a group or not the reason for the argument. But again, it doesn't change the fact that an argument must stand on its own, regardless of authority and regardless of the group you belong to. Belonging is usually used as an attack manipulation tool, right? And not only connected to authority, but also connected to the personal attack. I don't want to say it. This is they love to use this for these sort of things. But when they put you in a group, let's say, it's a good word, I thought, a pervert. Oh, you are a pervert. So anything you say is worthless. There is no evidence the person is a pervert or anything of the like. But because it's in the group, it's enough to manipulate people not to listen to what the person is saying. This is the objective of belonging. The true objective is this. Because you are part of the group, or because you are not part of the group, what you say have or doesn't have validity. If you stop to think about it, this is a very childish manipulation tool, but it works really well. So, these are the two very common manipulation tools you find in religious discourse. This is the advice I give, is never trust anyone talking about religion. Any article, any video, any lecture, no one. Always verify. And here I'm including myself. Always verify what I'm saying. I know it's a lot of work. It is. The alternative is you have to put your trust in someone and hope that person doesn't betray it, that that person is manipulating you. It's a viable option. But again, the idea would be to always verify these things you listen, because they tend to be filled with these manipulation tools, filled with partial truths. So when you pick a narrative, a religious narrative, they constructed, and you try to analyze it, even if you believe it, just suspend this belief. Say, no, let's say this is not real. Why? Question it, right? You will probably notice a lot of partial truths, because that's the only way you can make something that is not known at best, right? We don't know if Jesus existed. Jesus is a hypothesis. He could have existed, he could not have existed. We don't know. We don't have enough argument. We don't have enough evidence. No, arguments are a lot. Evidence is what lacks. So the only way to make that into a fact is through conviction. And the only way you can make conviction stick is using manipulation. And the most, what's the word? The experts among them, they will use, instead of lies, because the more educated you are, the easier lies are to spot, they use these partial truths. And they will create a narrative that at first glance will appear to be rational. It will appear to be logical. It will appear to be truth. It will. But the moment you start breaking the narrative down, you will see, oh, they kept all this information out. If you add all this information they kept out, the entire narrative changes. Oh, you see, you start to notice these patterns. You start to notice these manipulations. And in things like debates, discussions, you really quickly see things like authority being used, belonging being used, because they can't deal with the arguments. They don't deal in facts, they deal in conviction. But they want conviction to be taken as facts. And the only way that happens is through manipulation, through deceit, through lies.
That's all for today, everyone. If you liked, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, sharing. That helps. Check the other social media like X. I'm always publishing articles there that's in companionship to the episodes. And again, if you found something interesting, please don't trust me. Check it out for yourself. You'll find so much more information out there. Thank you all for your support, and I see you next time.